if you just joined us, we're live on Channel 5. We're also live on My 5. And now Larry and Ricky are with me. And later, we're going to be asking if parents should be charging their adult kids rent. But now, we're going to talk about something that affects nearly 1 million people in the UK, and that is dementia. The number of people with the disease is on the rise, and it's been driven by an ageing population. I'm joined now by author and head of knowledge at the Alzheimer's Society, Dr. Tim Beanland. Tim, thank you so much for giving us your time. Look, first off, I think we need to differentiate and sort of clarify for people, what is the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia?
Yeah, so thanks for having me on. Dementia is an overarching term that we use when there are diseases in the brain that cause problems with memory and thinking and planning, and importantly, impact daily life. So we sometimes call it an umbrella term. And there are lots of different things that can cause dementia. Alzheimer's disease is simply the most common type of dementia. So about 2/3 of people with dementia will have Alzheimer's disease. There are other causes. Vascular dementia is quite closely linked to stroke. Sometimes people have a combination of both, but put simply, Alzheimer's disease is just the most common kind of dementia, and they're all brain diseases and they all affect daily life.
And they seem to be on the rise, as we just mentioned. And is that because the population is living longer, or is there something else at play?
Well, what's interesting is dementia is now the leading cause of death in the UK, and 1 in 3 people born today will develop dementia. So yes, people are living longer, and dementia is a disease, but it's also very closely linked to aging. So the older you get, not everyone will get it, obviously, but you are more likely to get it. For dementia, unlike, say, stroke or cancer, we don't have a cure or a treatment that really slows it down. So as we're all getting older, more people are falling into the age categories when we're at risk of getting dementia, and then the numbers are going up.
Now, Tim, I know that you've been writing a book about this, but what are your top tips for keeping the disease at bay?
Yes, so we think 40% of cases of dementia can be prevented. So that's a positive thing to take away. There are 2 main ways to look after your brain for brain health. One is to look after your heart. So we call that healthy heart, healthy head. That means physical activity, a healthy balanced diet, not smoking if you can, not too much of the alcohol. And then the other thing you can really do, which we often call use it or lose it, is really try to stimulate your grey matter. And that can be anything that is mentally and socially stimulating. So whatever works for you and challenges the brain, gives you novelty. So if it's your thing, learn a new language, take up puzzles. I was singing for the Brain group, the Alzheimer's Society run yesterday, and people were having a great time just socially interacting. That's good stimulation for the brain. But all of these things, we often use the analogy with the gym. If you think of going to the gym, you need to keep working on bigger weights, so keep challenging yourself. And you also probably want to mix in different ways of challenging. So if you just did one thing at the gym, you might have massive arms but weedy legs. So with same with the brain, you need to mix in different activities. But mainly, mentally and social activity is really good. That's offsetting dementia and stopping the symptoms catching up with you.
Tim, thank you so much for giving us your time. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Tim Beanland there, the head of knowledge at the Alzheimer's Society. Now, we are joined in the studio by GP Dr. Amos Ogunkoya. We're going to be talking about how to spot some of the signs and what help you can get. But first up, I know that you two have also had experience of dementia in the family. Ricky, how did you come into contact with dementia?
So my dad's got vascular dementia. We didn't realise that he'd had a fall in his house maybe about 5 or 6 years ago. He didn't tell anybody, he didn't go to the doctors about it. And when he was diagnosed in 2020, he was diagnosed during the first lockdown, during that really scary time. And the CT scan showed that he'd had like some kind of head trauma. And when we quizzed him about it, he said, "Oh, I did have a fall down the stairs a few years ago, but I didn't worry about it." But that subsequently was the onset of the dementia. But yeah, it was a really scary time for us, really, because as a family, we didn't really know it was coming. We didn't know how to deal with it at the time, because obviously it's
he was quite young, wasn't he?
He was young as well. He's going to be 65 next month. So he's now in a care home. He's obviously one of the youngest people there. But yeah, it's been tough. It's been a long journey, but it's about kind of like adapting to the scenario, adapting to the situation, and he's in the best place where he can get care now.
Dr. Amos, is that a common story, this idea of a head trauma being the start of dementia signs?
It's not typical, but any form of trauma to the brain can cause later down the line some form of neurodegeneration, which can present itself in memory issues and a form of dementia. This is the thing about dementia, it affects individuals in different ways. The brain's very complex, and for some people it could be word finding issues. Some people it's confusion and where they are in space, so they get lost a lot more. So you sometimes find people driving and not know where they're going. So yeah, it does affect people individually. Sometimes it is a head trauma that can cause the first signs of it.
Well, look, we're going to be discussing about what help is available out there, and also the early signs of dementia and what you should be looking out for as well. But if you're worried about anything, something you've noticed either in yourself or someone close to you, then pick up the phone, give us a call now if you like, and speak directly to Dr. Amos. 0207 862 2222 is the number that you need. Larry, your experiences with dementia?
Well, my mother's 92 now, and she has vascular dementia. So it's interesting that both of us have got this, and she's also has 24-hour care. But I think for a lot of people like our family, it did coincide with the pandemic, and so initially we didn't know what was pandemic and what was was it social isolation or was it something else. And the kind of looking back now, the big one for us was hallucinations. My mother would hallucinate something was on the ground and went to pick it up and it wasn't there. And I asked you about this before. Yeah. Oh, really? And you said that's quite common. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned that she had some eye issues as well.
Yes, she had macular degeneration.
It's interesting that you guys had the same issue around the pandemic. We know that social isolation can worsen things like dementia because it's the use it or lose it. If you're not being stimulated, if you're not meeting and talking to people, we forget how much of our daily life is spent interacting and how that challenges us.
I definitely saw a decline with my dad during that period when I was going to like drop him off food and things like that. And I was saying to him, like, get out and go and walk around the park, but he just wouldn't do it. And I definitely saw a decline.
And it is striking. I mean, one of the most striking things that I've talked about on this show over the last few months is that stat that came out that people over the age of 65 can go up to a month without speaking to anybody. And that, of course, must be a huge contributor to that use it or lose it. Just digging a little bit deeper into that and what we heard from Tim Beanland, the idea that we're not saying that you have to go out and sort of start solving maths problems. Even interacting with people is going to help, right?
Well, that's the point, and I'm glad that Tim mentioned it, is that there's a lot of social isolation there, and there are people who haven't seen or talked to anyone and don't even get support or speak to anyone on the phone. It doesn't have to be massively challenging. You don't have to go and do calculus or anything like that. You can just go speak to someone on the phone. You can have a social interaction, go to the shops. It's sad because we've lost that community aspect, that kind of village idea of people going to check in on people or seeing your neighbour. And I think that is affecting people as they age worse.
All right, let's take a call. Sarah's got in touch from Belfast. Sarah, welcome to the show. What would you like to ask the doctor?
Hello, I would like to ask the GP about the recent study that was done in 2022. It was found that 37,689 people found a link between high sugar intake and an increased risk in Alzheimer's, especially among women.
Yeah, that is evidence I'm aware of as well. We know that dementia and Alzheimer's increases in those who have diabetes. The theory behind that is that we think that having high blood sugar is highly inflammatory, and we think that there's a huge inflammatory process in a lot of the dementias and a lot of the neurodegenerative conditions. So controlling your diet, that's why we're talking about eating well and exercising, and reducing your blood sugar spikes is really important for that moving forward.
Sarah, are you worried about yourself? Are you worried about your blood sugar?
Well, I do take a general interest in about health issues, and I really do think if it was publicised more, that the risk of Alzheimer's and the link between sugar, like not just a general healthy lifestyle, because everybody gets fed up here and like you have to eat well, exercise well. But if it was really made clear to people that this is real, and it's shown in studies that sugar can actually cause Alzheimer's and dementia, I think people would really think more about what they're putting into their bodies.
Good point. Sarah, thank you. I must say I was unaware of the link between diabetes and dementia.
There's a lot of risk between high sugar diets and a lot of inflammatory conditions, but it's actually well established.
Okay. Well, look, let's take another call. Alison's got in touch from Derbyshire. Alison, welcome to the show. Good afternoon. What would you like to ask the doctor?
Hiya. I also was unaware of the link between sugar and dementia. That's quite shocking, really. But I just really wanted to ask, my mother is 75 this year. She's really forgetful. She's struggling to find the right word all the time. She's struggling to finish her sentences. She's looking in her bag for things that are actually already in front of her on the table. Just very absent-minded, very forgetful. I'm just thinking at 74, coming up 75, is this normal for that age? And we are on a list for the NHS, by the way, but that's a long wait to be seen.
Okay. So I suppose Alison's asking the most important question, which is, what are those early signs and what's the difference between sort of becoming a little bit old and forgetful and actually dementia?
Yeah. Thank you so much for calling, Alison. I think what you have mentioned is quite concerning, and I'm glad that you're on the list. The first signs can be absent-mindedness. I think what I recognise as a GP, often, it's very similar to Alison's story. It's not the patient themselves, it's their relative, friend or partner who's concerned, because they tend to spot some of the issues. And they're the ones who notice that their loved one isn't where they were before. And so you are doing the right thing. You have sought help. Misplacing keys, confusion, or not being able to do activities they used to do can be kind of the early signs of dementia. But
again, Doctor, I think a lot of people listening to this of all ages, I mean, I can tell you, I'll forget stuff. Sometimes I'll be driving somewhere and go, gosh, I can't remember how I got here.
I get when you walk into a new room, you just forget what you were going into that room
what you're
for.
going to say. But I mean, do we all, as we get older, is our memory sort of loses its sharpness a little bit and our mental agility sort of slows down? Is there a point where that's natural, happens to everyone, and then where it's actually, no, this is now verging into dementia? What's that precipice that you have to cross?
That's a really good question. So what you guys are describing are things to do with concentration. Even I get absent-minded sometimes. When you come into your GP, we do assessments, because often there is a threshold, and the things that Tim described about improving your brain, use it, lose it, is to keep you above that threshold before it affects your life. Right. Some people do have memory issues, but it never becomes significant to them because they've got so much reserve there. Yeah. So yeah, it's not uncommon to become more forgetful, but when it's got to the point where it's impacting your life and other people are noticing it and it's happening more and more, that's really the threshold for me clinically.
I think with my mother, the thing I noticed was when you've told her something and then 10 minutes later she would ask you the same question again. And that to me was the moment, okay, so we are dealing with something more than just being a bit doddery like we're all getting, you know.
Right. Let's take another call. Alison, thank you for your call, by the way. Let's speak to Barbara, who's got in touch with us from Coventry. Barbara, welcome to the show. What would you like to ask the doctor?
Hello, Alexis. I had a radiology report, and on it says I've got periventricular ischemic changes in keeping with small vessel disease.
And you're concerned about that?
I am, yes.
Yes. So it's not uncommon, but again, this is something that you probably need to talk to your GP about directly. For having, have you got any other heart conditions or blood vessel disease?
I have heart disease.
Yeah, so your brain's full of blood vessels. So if you've got heart disease, you sometimes have damage in other blood vessels. And this can be shown on scans as well. It usually means that if this gets worse over time, that you might have some problems. But if you do some lifestyle changes and take the right medications, reduce your cholesterol, you can halt that deterioration.
Barbara.
Strokes.
Barbara, thank you for that. I'm just moving on because I want to squeeze Sean in, who's dialed in. Good afternoon, Sean. What would you like to ask the doctor?
Hello, good afternoon. I'm a bit confused about what dementia really is. I understand it must be difficult, but it's blooming difficult. I live alone, and I'm not really sure. What is it? How do I know?
How do you know if you have it?
Yeah.
Yeah, Sian, very good question. So someone who lives alone and is perhaps not, as you said, as a GP, you see most of those cases brought to you by family members who can say, I think there's been a little change. But if you are living alone, someone like Sian, how do you know?
That's one of the difficult situations because of the social isolation and almost living in a vacuum. There's nothing else to compare it to. It would be the forgetfulness, but one of the issues here is whether that person has insight. A lot of people don't know that their memory, because who forgets, they forget. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so it is really difficult. I would suggest that if you are concerned, you call your GP and they can do memory assessments. That's what we tend to do in clinic. And if you fall below a certain threshold, then we refer you onwards. But usually, and this is a sweeping statement, people who are concerned about their memory are really the ones that we need to worry about because you have the insight to be concerned.
Sure.
Sian, I think a visit to your GP perhaps might be in order if you are concerned. Look, thank you all. And thank you for sharing your stories, you two. I would share mine briefly. My grandfather at the age of 94, again, started forgetting things and we kind of all noticed. And I think on another day, perhaps we should tackle how to deal with people. Do you tell them, no, I already told you this? Is that the right way to go? Or
my mother says Happy Christmas now, all times of the year. And I just say, Happy Christmas to you too. Let's all share the joy.
Is that, again, I don't have too much time to go through this, but I know a lot of people watching will be asking the same question. The general advice from should you be trying to bring someone back from forgetting, from being absent-minded, or should you sort of go with it? What's the advice that you give?
I think the answer is to respond with compassion and always try to help them. I wouldn't berate anyone. If you're trying to help them get through their daily life, fine, do that. Right. But it is frustrating.
So even if they're wishing you Happy Christmas, just go with it. Don't try and explain that Christmas has already been. Right, okay. I think it's really, because I think so many people just don't know what to do and perhaps they might end up doing the wrong thing. Look, if you've been affected by anything we've been speaking about today, there is help available. So you can contact Alzheimer's Society 0333 150 3456. They're open Monday to Wednesday, 9 to 8 p.m. Thursday and Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Saturday and Sunday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Also, you can call Age UK and you can get them on 0800 678 1602. And they're open 365 days a year from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. So lots of help out there. Dr. Amos, thank you. Thank you for coming in. Pleasure to see you. Look, after the break, we're going to be asking